Welcome to Cultivated Live for what's today? Thursday, April 18th, 2 days ahead of 420. I'm Jay Rosenthal, the co-founder of Cultivated Media and the host of this program, Cultivated Live. Since we launched, our goal at Cultivated has been to be cannabis industry first, providing you with the most important, insightful, and useful information in a very timely fashion. We do that in two key ways. One, through our daily newsletter at Cultivated Daily. Please subscribe. And two, through this daily live stream, Cultivated Live on YouTube and LinkedIn. Please follow us on LinkedIn, smash the subscribe button on YouTube, and subscribe to our daily newsletter. And if you're watching this, it is linked below, so go do that now. In a moment, I'm going to be joined by Krista Raymer, who is camped out at, I don't know, maybe the Fort Lauderdale airport, maybe Miami. We're going to find out. Looks like she's camped out in South Florida coming out of Benzinga, so we'll connect with her in a moment. But before we do, we're going to run through what is driving the cannabis news today. Give me 1 second. And you'll see this in today's newsletter. It looks like lawmakers love 420, or at least talking about cannabis around 420. Pro-cannabis lawmakers descended on Capitol Hill for a number of cannabis-related events this week, including a press conference organized by the Last Prisoner Project, as well as the National Cannabis Policy Summit. Ron Wine, for his part, he's a senator from Oregon, said, "I want you to hear what my message is. I'm going to say one word: deschedule. Descheduling ought to be a Republican dream. Sometimes I think they're only for states' rights if they think the state is right." Pretty good turn of phrase, Senator Wyden. He is, of course, the chair of the powerful Senate Finance Committee. Now, outgoing Congressman Ed Blumenauer, a longtime cannabis champion and co-chair of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, at the press conference this year said, "We ought to be celebrating 420 every day." And Krista, I'll tell you this, I do celebrate 420 every day. Wyden, for his part, along with Senator Schumer and Cory Booker, are set to file a bill that would federally decriminalize cannabis later this month. They said at the event they're trying to recruit Republicans to join them. Good luck with that. And we'll start to see more stuff around 420, certainly some brand launches as well as we get into the weekend. Now, Village Farms International CEO Michael DeGilio talking about the excise tax in Canada, where it was not actually touched in this year's federal budget, said, "It is our view that the true measure of success for any industry is the ability to contribute tax revenue from profitable income, not taxation from top line sales." He is voicing the opinion of many in the sector in Canada that the excise tax is in many ways killing the industry. Here's what else is happening. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, again, castigated the push to legalize cannabis in Florida, saying that people will just toke up by elementary schools. Believe me, Governor DeSantis, if people are going to toke up near elementary schools, it will not be because there's legal cannabis or illegal cannabis, just because they like to toke up near schools. The U.S. Senate, dropped its version of the stablecoin bill that many in the industry hoped would be packaged with safer banking and passed with the FAA spending bill this month. This, according to Punchbowl News. And Illinois cannabis sales were up 9.8% in March, which is great, although it seems that growth is slowing. Krista, I'm going to bring you up now. That's what's driving the cannabis news. Give me 1 second to bring up my friend Krista Raymer from Vetrina. Hold on 1 sec. There she is. Can you hear me?
Hey, Jay.
Hey, Krista, you are in Florida. You just came out of Benzinga. I don't know where you're headed next, but how was the conference?
Conference was really interesting. It was a lot of very different conversations than I've had in the past. We are dealing with groups who are optimization, and it's super interesting because it's coming off of being in New Jersey just last week at Unpacked, and those conversations were about what are the local municipalities doing to limit the licenses today. And so the contrast was like quite intense compared to what I've experienced in the past.
It's interesting because, and was there any conversation, because obviously it's in Florida, about the ballot measure coming up in Florida in November, because that is a big deal for Florida operators for sure. But I think for the industry overall, it's really one of the last big giant states that are 20 million plus people that could legalize. Was that part of the conversation too?
Huge conversation. Everybody's talking about it. I think one of the things when we think about that as a potential market, you have so many markets around Florida that are not talking about recreational use right now. And so the draw in terms of cross purchasing is extensive, along with the amount of tourism that enters the state. So there's a significant amount of population here to be able to drive basically reoccurring revenue, but also what are the intricate kind of customer profiles that could be shopping from other states or while they're on vacation that could really increase the overall size of this market.
Yeah, from your mouth to Governor DeSantis' ears, because it seems like he wants to talk about it every day. He must think the politics are good for him to be against this measure, even though,
Yeah.
my guess is well over 50% of the people support it in Florida. We'll see in November. What else are you seeing out in the world? Because I think yesterday I mentioned we're going to talk about loyalty and
Mm-hmm.
segmentation. Talk a little about that,
Yeah.
and maybe then we'll talk about sort of this weekend because it's going to be a big week of sales. But talk about loyalty in this context.
I mean, for this weekend specifically, it's so important. 420 is one of the biggest opportunities where we see in a calendar year to acquire new customers. Now, are these new customers like net new customers who have never purchased cannabis before? Maybe. Are they shopping from other locations? Probably. So having them enter into a loyalty program that adds value for the customer is incredibly important because it's your opportunity to basically recapture market share that maybe you previously lost or you never captured in the first place. One of the things that we were thinking about, and it's like very topical after being in New Jersey and now being in a place where there's a lot of people who have been in more mature markets, which is at Benzinga, is that there are like eras that are playing out kind of consistently as markets open. And I would say that they are on fast forward every time there is a new market. So originally, if we were to go back in time, was Colorado, was California talking about loyalty in the first months of being open? No. Are we now in New Jersey? Absolutely. That's like a really great indication that the industry as a whole is learning things along the way. Operators are learning things along the way. And you have some seasoned operators as well as like a lot of new operators in the New Jersey space. This plays out in New York as well. And so the eras are really marked by where and how are we understanding our relationship with our customer. The first era is around kind of like leveraging, say, for example, weed maps to capture customers, and then moving into SEO. Those things are not eliminated when we get into our current era, but they layer on top of as additional tools. What I think is really interesting is when we get into understanding your customer and how you better service your customer, this is where loyalty shows up, and it shows up in segmentations.
Yeah, and I listen to you, you know that religiously, and there are, if you really break it down, there's maybe three ways that you can think about this. One, a new customer comes in 420, let's capture them as reoccurring customers. Two, the reoccurring customer comes in once every 8 weeks. Let's see if we can get them to come in once every 6 or 7. Or there's people that come in 3 times a year. Can we get them to buy more in that, bigger basket size? And this is like one of those things that like those things might happen all in the course of 2 or 3 days. All of those customers that may come in. So actually having your staff thinking about maybe those 3 different segments of people and how to actually sell them that day, but also capture them ongoing seems like an important inflection point for the year.
It's a super important inflection point. I think if we look at the previous years and how we've operated 420, there's been a trend. And if you were to zoom out, you don't necessarily see a net increase. So there's questions as a retailer as you go into 420 is like, one, what is our goal with 420? Are we wanting to see a net sales increase, or are we wanting to capture new customers? What's the price of capturing a new customer we're willing to pay, basically? And then also, how do we reduce the amount of demand push and pull around? Meaning, like, if we sell them a lot of product at 420, are we actually pushing them out of the store for a longer period after? And so marking and basically mapping where transactions happen over a year is a really important part of segmenting and understanding the customer base, as well as understanding where there is an opportunity to potentially increase transactions in a year. So 420 is like a part of a much larger story, but it's a really significant area because it's not just this industry that is talking about 420. I don't know if you saw the things from Pizza around that like consumption box, but I think it's super interesting now that you have other groups basically leveraging this as a holiday to activate their customer with pizza. And so it's an important part to consider is what is our customers' experience around 420 outside of just shopping in the store? Like, who else is having this conversation?
Right. And it was interesting. So there was Pizza. I think there's a couple, we posted a number of them in today's newsletter. I think one of the other ones was a deliciously dope dime bag at Jimmy John's and a 420 $4.20 chicken sandwich at Popeyes. So everybody's getting in on the action. Those actually sound quite delicious. I live near a Pizza, and on the way I go by 3 or 4 dispensaries. So I think that might be part of my plan. It happens to be the same week
Yeah.
that Tim Hortons is rolling out pizza in Canada, which is has nothing to do with 420, I don't think, but it is interesting that it's happening at the same time. But let me ask you a question, because I want to
Yeah.
hone in on exactly what you said. Thinking about sales, like if you look at sales in aggregate over the year, if you looked at it day to day, yeah, 420 might be big, but in aggregate, it doesn't necessarily spike sales for April, for example. But
Yeah.
so is it your like is it a good goal, or do dispensaries have goals to say, look, of course we want to sell product at 420, but if we can make 100 new repeat customers out of 420 that weren't here before, that actually may have a net impact over the year. And maybe that's one of the focuses that we want our bud tenders to think about during that day, is like, how do we get these people to come back at some point if they're new?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have, if you're acquiring new customers, specifically customers that are already purchasing potentially from other locations, you've got to have a bounce back strategy. And if it is you haven't shopped with us in 90 days, like that's a problem, because they're going to be getting the same type of messaging probably from the other locations that they purchased at. 420 is definitely an opportunity where customers are looking at deals online and picking which store to go to shop, and potentially multiple locations depending on what the deals look like. So you are competing in terms of share of voice. So that's one thing to consider, is how difficult it is to capture the attention of the customer as well as after the fact. So you need a bounce back strategy after the fact, and as well as a different strategy for your core customer base as well, to ensure that you're not just pulling their demand forward, basically, that you're inspiring new purchasing.
Right. And you're talking about inspiring, create a good experience. I guess the true is,
Yeah.
it's also true on the opposite. Like, you don't want it to be a shitty experience
Yeah.
on 420 because you're super crowded, major long lines, not enough staff, or the product that you like. I think that's also part of it. I think that's part of it. And like, I assume people are staffing up for it as well. And that is a key component to ensure a good experience, or even just an average experience during the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, you're unlikely, if somebody's coming to the store on 420, they've probably looked at the deals that you have going on, and you're unlikely to have a customer walk out of the doors. But
Right.
to your point, it's like, what was that experience like? And are you basically training the customer that they want to come back to you in the future? And that is like one of the biggest opportunities with 420. And so the experience that the customer has, how easy it is to complete the transaction, how quick the teams are, can directly impact whether they want to come back and shop with you.
Yeah. It's an important day for a whole array of reasons. I think we often think about sort of the top line, or people think it's a big sales day. Yes. But if it's only a big sales day, it's not going to, it's going to average out throughout the year, and April will be April, and May will be
Yeah.
May. The goal is to
Yeah.
like not make it such a big sales day that you screw up May or maybe even March. But also think about how to get that person to maybe increase basket size that day, but also make it an experience that they want to come back in 3 weeks rather than 4, or 4 instead of 6. It's like, how do you think
Yeah.
about those key attributes to get them back in store faster with bigger basket size? That's why I like talking to you, because you're playing 3-dimensional retail chess.
Well, it's interesting if you think about your best customers in cannabis, they're shopping likely somewhere between every 7 and 13 days. So around 420, if you miss an opportunity at the 2 weeks after 420, if your sales are down, it's likely because your best customers are not shopping back in the store.
Right.
It's going to take longer to measure that impact. So the next kind of level of engaged customers probably shopping in the range of every 20 days, like depending on the market for sure. But that, then you have to think about that is like 420, 20 days from then is like when the next potential transaction would happen. So the question is did you increase, like basically insert a transaction in their purchasing behavior so it lives outside of this cadence, or did you just move their cadence around? And it's in reviewing the data after the fact that you would know that. It's very difficult to know that ahead, but what you can do is actually take a look and say, hey, how are my 2 weeks ahead of this week, basically? And it's
Right.
like, have you seen a reduction in the number of new customers? Have you seen a reduction in the number of unique customers? Have you seen a reduction in the number of transactions? Transactions are not necessarily a reflection of customers and the number of unique customers. So it's important to look at those things as well when you analyze the impact of 420.
Yeah, and actually, Catherine Long of Vetrina wrote in the notes, "Where are you pushing your next customer transaction to?" That's exactly what you're talking about, and I
Yeah.
think that is important. That's important, especially if you think about a retail that's been open more than a year, right? Like you
Mhm.
may have 1 year of data, which is not a huge set, but you relatively know where you were last year versus this year versus when customers are coming in versus not coming in. I think that's
Yeah.
important. I've been thinking about, what is the corollary in regular retail, like, November, December, huge, I don't know, clothing sales, right? Because of the holidays, but January must just be a gut
Yeah.
punch to retailers because they know people aren't coming back for that month or two. I think you want to try to avoid that in a store that your best customers are coming once a month, really, or twice a month.
And you know what's funny is I actually had this exact conversation with multiple like large retailers at Benzinga. Is that if you look at the data, and this is where and how you format the data is really important to understand it. If we look at December, December had 5 Fridays. It performed really high. January and February had 4 Fridays. Also, February is a shorter day. And so the combination of all of those things, if you compare them just like apples to apples, you are going down a path where you think that you had a really bad January and February. But if you actually look at the larger data set of and analyze week over week, it looks like and paints a very different story. And
Right.
so that's a part of understanding when you're even looking at this. Like if you're looking at 420, how are you formatting your reports to understand the insights? Is like the very beginning parts of knowing what to do next.
It's like I should have paid attention in statistics class in university. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes, you should have.
Yet. A little late for that. The funny thing is now I'm making these. And you're gonna laugh at this. I'm gonna cover up who it's for, but I have this funny graph that I've made, and it's like I'm gonna do it really quickly. Like it's so rudimentary. That's like I have deeper level of understanding of data, but not in this. I drew it with a Sharpie, so clear it's not meant to be. It's more, but it is one of those things. Like you can look at a month, any month.
Yeah.
If it has 5 Fridays worth versus 4, the data is going to look skewed if you just look at the month basis. But week over week or any 4 week period over time, it is
Yeah.
important. And this is going to be similarly important for April, yes, but maybe the 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after, or the months on either end, and you average it
Yeah.
out. 420 is not likely to be this massive spike where April's like a gangbusters month, but how do you get those people? I think your point is how do you get people to come back more?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to sacrifice May because you want a great 420.
Exactly. And because you probably aren't selling the transactions with the gross margin that you could have in May.
Right, right. And there's long
Yeah.
weekends in May, both in Canada and in the States, kick off to summer. Maybe we'll talk about that next week, sort of how to, and I think we talked about this before. Like almost every month of the year, there is something that can be a pillar of like getting customers to come back, running promotions, increasing basket size, increasing frequency of time in store. Um, that's why I like talking to you, Krista, because it gives me something to think about next time I go buy weed, which will be tomorrow.
I love that for you. I love that for us.
It's good for the family too when I buy more weed. It turns out I'm much more mellow. Krista, safe travels to you from Miami
Thank
to or
you.
Florida, wherever you're headed next. We look forward to talking to you next week. Thank you for your time and insight for you and for the entire team at Vetrina. It's such good stuff. You give us the nuggets every single Thursday.
Love it.
Love it. Give me 1 sec. We're going to wrap up the show. Thank you all for joining us here on YouTube or LinkedIn, wherever you joined us. Subscribe to our daily newsletter at cultivated.news. That's where to find us. I'll be back here tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern on LinkedIn and YouTube. Krista, have a great day, everybody.
Thank
and
you.
Remember, and this is really important, buy weed at your local dispensary today and buy a little more than you normally would. Give them a little bump going into the 420 weekend. Have a good day, everybody.